All right, guys, we're back for another week, another episode of Movie Mainline. Or
Take
is it
two.
Movie Mainline? Two. Yeah, Movie Mainline or Movie Mainline podcast, episode 5. There's an honorary member, which I think Eric Holmes. Eric Holmes is now Hardline Holmes in honor. Hardline Holmes. He's 2 thumbs up. Eric, let's just start with Eric. We're going to talk about the 5th member in a second, but what is Hardline Holmes, Eric? Why are you suddenly hardline? You are always hardcore. Eric Holmes, talk about that name.
It's not hardcore Holmes. It's Hardline Holmes.
I was just saying that you're always hardcore, but why is it hardline? As you correct me, by the way, before Hardline gets on, I'm just going to put him on blast right now. He is a very talented screenwriter and hopefully filmmaker. So in about 50 episodes, we're going to have to find a new co-host of the show because he's going to probably just leave us in the dust. So I'm just saying this preemptively right now. So what is Hardline about, Mr. Holmes?
Well, a couple of weeks ago, if you're listening, we did a Brandon Lee retrospective. And if you haven't heard that, you can go to youtube.com and look up Movie Mainline or not. I don't know how that works.
And you were talking about Rapid Fire.
But we were talking about Brendan Lee and Rapid Fire, and I mentioned the band Hardline, which is on the soundtrack of that, predominantly on the soundtrack. And I mentioned it, and Greg, to my surprise, seemed to be quite smitten with the band. And I suppose, Greg, you could probably finish the story for me.
Well, I love Hardline. I've been listening to Hardline quite a bit the last couple of weeks on my morning walks and runs. You know what? I'm just going to say, if I say morning runs, I'm almost 50. That sounds weird. But my morning walks through Calabasas, I've been listening to Hardline. So whether you have the runs,
hair metal.
Right, Lewis is saying it's fun hair metal and straight ahead rock. I love that. Hardline Holmes, I guess for some reason, as much as I love his screenplay and I love his talent, I feel bad because I think Hardline Holmes thought this horrible moderator only listened to Vivaldi and put Grey Poupon on his sandwiches. So once in a while, I do like awesome music. By the way, Grey Poupon's very good. Lewis.
No, it's not.
What? It's not.
It's really
okay.
not.
Every single week, Lewis tries to get under my skin, and that's the best. To be honest, I like that because that's my favorite part of the show. Lewis, what have you been up to the last week? You are so busy. You're a busy man.
Oh, always, man. Always having fun doing some podcasts, stuff like that. And I got a cool list of things you don't fuck with. That's the theme for this week. And I'll explain a little bit more when it's my turn. But yeah, it's going to be a fun list.
Well, things I think a lot of people will F with, since I never swear, and that's my horrible thing, is things that I would like to F with is that shirt. Lewis, can we tell our YouTube watchers what is, well, that goes again, right as Bruce is laughing, I'm just realizing that's as bad as my morning runs thing, but who is that weird man? Is that Stanley Kubrick, sir?
That is the wonderful Stanley Kubrick. The man himself. He is all-time favorite director of mine, and quickly followed by Akira Kurosawa, because those two just had such an influence on me personally as a kid and as an adult still.
Okay.
Like, I love their movies, so
Very,
they're always
very
number
cool.
1 and number 2 for me.
Was it you a couple of weeks ago or maybe several days ago that suggested we do a Kurosawa segment, or who was?
Somebody said that, but I was like, yes.
You know, I always have bad audio problems here, guys. I apologize. Whenever I hear Luis Lacau talk about Kurosawa being his number 2 filmmaker, for some reason I just hear Brian De Palma is his number 2 filmmaker. So it's just, maybe it's the patch that's going right through. But speaking of filmmakers and movements and genres, I think the biggest challenge this week, the biggest job this week will be done by Bruce Purkey. Bruce, what do you have for us this week? It's quite monumental, and it's a lot of extra work that you're doing.
Well, I am going to be talking about Hammer films, kind of in general, but not in too great a detail because they have a ton of movies. But I'm going to definitely focus on 3 movies that are kind of off the beaten path for even probably some Hammer fans, which should be kind of fun. Plus, there will be a connection of at least 2 actors to Stanley Kubrick. So that could be an interesting little tie-in for Luis.
Either way is perfect. He is perfect either way. Like Luis was talking to me last week, and I made too much of a to-do about that.
Can we just get the obvious question out of the way first? Since we talked about Kubrick twice, everyone's favorite Kubrick movie? Or is that too hard for everyone?
Clockwork. No, it's easy. Clockwork Orange. Yes, I know. With very cool with the our listeners can't see it. There's a statue or some kind of collectible that Luis has. I think one of the Droogs. Oh yeah. I don't think I'm not gonna every week. By the way, I do name drop. I did interview Malcolm McDowell for the Clockwork Orange release on Warner Home Video years ago.
Wow.
And yes, I do remember actually interviewing Malcolm McDowell, right? That's his name.
Yeah.
And remember several.
Dude, he's a sweetheart, man.
Great guy.
He is such a nice person. I actually met him and got my copy of Caligula signed by him because I was like, yes, and he just went on a fucking rant about the movie, and I was like, oh my god, this is awesome. Malcolm McDowell is talking to me about Caligula. And then on top of that, I actually got to meet the two actors from 2001 and had a conversation for almost 40 minutes. They did not want to let me go, which was freaking awesome. And I got so much insight into Kubrick, his style, everything. Oh my God. Both of them were actually casted without an audition. Kubrick actually emailed them and said, look, or not email, mailed them and said, look, this is the proposal. I want you to be on the set. And they're like, are you going to ask us to audition? And he's like, no, I watched about 40, 50 hours of footage of you guys. I'm good. And they're like, you did what?
Wow. That is thorough. That is thorough. Speaking of thorough, incredible. I know you have a collection, Luis. Maybe next week that your job will be, since you did a great Cuban cinema segment last week, but I think maybe your job next week, not like I'm a taskmaster, but to dig up that Caligula DVD or Blu-ray. I would love to see.
Oh, they got the how many different versions of Caligula they got? They got the R-rated, the unrated. Yeah. I don't know if next week is. Wow. I don't know if next week is the time.
Oh, the book. Wow. Oh, yeah. Wow.
I don't know if next week is the time, but we definitely need to hit up on Caligula and the history of Caligula, because there's a story to be told there for sure.
Oh, definitely.
I think we have Eric Holmes' next segment for next week.
Might be.
Before we get to for our podcast, what we do is our first segment will be a movie rewind. But before we get to the rewind, we always like to spotlight other people and what they're doing, their various craft work or professions, or other fellow podcasters. Hardline Holmes, you wanted to talk about someone who's near and dear to our show. Can you just talk about?
Yes, I would like to point out the unofficial fifth member of the Movie Mainline podcast, who started with us. I believe Bruce started this, and then we all kind of came together. And there's a fifth one that no one's seen on here yet, but his name is William Lindis. And William Lindis obviously couldn't join us because he has his own podcast called the Movie Bears Podcast, which you can find on YouTube. Sure, you can. They usually do what they call a live stream on YouTube on Tuesdays, which is when we're recording. So once we're done with this, I'm hitting up the Movie Bears, the live stream. Yeah. But he does it with Brad Harris and Jim Pugliafico. They're the self-proclaimed huggable hairy homos, I believe.
Yes.
Probably got. And their podcast is really fun to listen to. They're very warm guys. They often have different, they watch movies and there you go.
My son named him William, not knowing that William is a bear.
Wow, so awesome.
This is William's altar totem, I guess, for tonight. So
that's very cool. Little Midsommar throw in right there.
But they have a very unique take on movies.
They really do.
And I would recommend anyone check them out, and especially if you can hit them up when they're doing the live stream on Tuesdays. Usually Tuesdays, sometimes I'm sure things get in the way. They move it a day or two, but I believe it's on Tuesdays on YouTube, and just look them up. Movie Bear Podcasts. It's well worth listening to. And unfortunately, William isn't the official fifth member, but in my heart, and I'm sure yours, he's our official fifth member.
Oh, hell yeah.
Well,
he gave us so many tips when we first started, and he gave us kind of streamlined the process a little bit for us, which was pretty awesome.
Yeah, I asked William Lindis if he had any cinematics advice, and he said, well, the first thing is Anderson should get a new partner. But that wasn't so nice. Thank you, William Lindis, for that. No, but in all seriousness, brass tacks regarding William Lindis, he is excellent when it comes. Louis, you know all about film festivals. He just devours film festivals, and he just consumes so much films that he has the scoop on a lot of upcoming movies down the road. And it's one of these things that there are some people who just consume film and just get the scoop just to get the scoop. And it just seems like us, he's one of those guys who just really loves watching movies. So if there's a movie that's coming out in a couple of months, he'll just inform us and say, I saw that movie and this is what I think about it. So he's a pure cinema lover. Would you call him
cinematic?
Yes, I would call him definitely an elevated cinematics member, just like I wish I was one. But he's a totally great guy, and we miss him. Maybe one of these days, once you guys kick me out, he'll be part of this whole crew. He'll be the moderator. But anyone regarding our rewind segment, have you guys seen any rewind stuff? Okay, Bruce.
I have two.
You have two.
Okay, Bruce, go ahead. You lead it.
Okay. All right. I was going to say, first of all, that I owe a rewind next week to Luis because I didn't get one of his this week. So you better have some good movies this week for me to watch one of them.
I promise.
All right.
I promise.
So
hopefully you haven't seen all of them.
Well, first of all, I know that Greg knows that I watched Driveways, which Driveways was one of the ones he suggested. And I'm not going to go into a whole redescription of what it is because people should listen to that episode or go on to Movie Mainline or Cinematics even and listen to what Greg says about Driveways. Other than I will concur that it is one of those movies that seems like it's going to be kind of Lifetime-esque, very dry and slow and cliched, and it's anything but. And I think it's really it earns its emotion, honestly, and it has really it's just the epitome of what you should get from an independent movie, where you have these great acting, small moments, but really big, honest emotions. And Brian Dennehy in that movie is freaking fantastic.
Yeah, I haven't seen it yet, but yeah.
I mean, he's been fantastic for 45 years.
Yeah.
I mean, what he does in this movie, and like you said, Greg, the final kind of dialogue / monologue that he has at the end is beautiful. It's beautiful. So once again, it's worth it.
Yeah, just to add before you get into your second pick, Bruce, Driveways is one of those movies that I think a lot of people won't see because it's slow, but it's slow in a very human, seductive fashion where by the time you get to the end, you feel like you've lived in this neighborhood for a while.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like a long movie at all as well. And there has a rewatchability factor to Driveways. And it's one of those films you were talking about Kurosawa, Louis, and how he's your number 2 favorite filmmaker. And when I think of Ikiru and Redbeard, all those humanistic films, I think one of the things is, my she's 80. And one of my regrets is I really want her to see Ikiru and Redbeard. And I'm sad that I only saw Ikiru after my dad passed. And Driveways, I put Driveways right up there. It's one of those things I really hope my mom gets to see. It's one of those. It's such a powerful film, and it gets better, I think. I don't know if you agree with me, Bruce, on this, but in fact, Bruce, on his video review, he actually had to change the setting. He actually went to, I think, a nearby area to do the review. I forgot what you did.
I went out to like a pond, and I had the birds were tweeting around and stuff because, so much of this movie is just outside, like in the yards and stuff, and almost the ambience of just normal outside sounds is a big part of this movie. Even though it's not in your face, it's there all the time.
So when Bruce Purkey is pulling a Henry David Thoreau / Walt Whitman to do a video review, the movie's a special one. What's your other rewind before we get to the other boys?
So my other rewind, and I have a few things to add to it because I just had some thoughts as I was watching it, is VFW. I went and watched VFW. This is, and I'm not going to hurt your feelings here, Greg, but this is what Last Blood wanted to be.
Oh, what?
I never thought about that, but you're not wrong. God damn! I wish I would have thought of it.
This is better than any of the Expendables movies in that sort of same genre. And really, what struck me, and first of all, I don't know if you've seen. I've seen the other movie this guy did, Joe Begos, recently, was Bliss, which isn't near as good, but it does have a common actor, and it has a few common elements that are good. But this movie is a solid B movie. Guy action sort of a deal. And what this is to me, this is like strongly in that camp of like Escape from New York era Carpenter.
Wow.
And even the soundtrack feels like it. And another thing that it kind of reminded me of, and I don't know if you're familiar with this, Neil Marshall from the Thousands. Neil Marshall is a director. He was really good for a little bit there. He did Dog Soldiers.
Yep.
And
Dog Soldiers.
Did The Descent. And this also has elements of Doomsday, which is a really weird movie he did, but this is way better. Yeah, this is way better. I know Doomsday is only in the aspect of you have this kind of almost Road Warrior-esque sci-fi drug gang that's across the street in this movie that doesn't quite match reality.
I love Dog Soldiers and I love Descent. Doomsday, after Descent, I was like, I'm all in on Neil Marshall, and then Doomsday came out, and I was like, pump the brakes a little bit.
It wasn't that bad. Come on.
It wasn't, but dude,
it wasn't up there.
He set the bar so high with
yeah.
Dog Soldier and Descent, and Doomsday was kind of lesser than. But
I thought the Bliss was actually a pretty good action movie, so I really am excited to see VFW now, because I actually enjoyed Bliss a little bit. So
VFW to me is a lot more solid of a movie, though. I mean, I think Bliss kind of wanted to. Yeah. VFW is just like, it knows what it is and it sticks to it. You got all these dudes, you got all these old action kind of character actor dudes, and they're all just rough and tumble. And like Eric said, the introduction of the one dude, and I don't want to say it either.
That's what I was going to ask. I didn't want you to get it away, but was that not as funny as did I oversell that?
William Sadler,
and it's
national treasure, right?
Yeah. Well, it still surprised me the way that introduction comes, because I saw something happening, and when you see it happening, you're like, what's happening? What are they doing? And then when they do it, you're like, oh, they're introducing that guy. That's awesome.
So wait, you said Carpenter Escape from New York era. Is it on that level almost even? Because those are big words.
Praise.
Yeah.
It's not as big as Scope. It's not sci-fi, but I mean, I think it just has that kind of pulpy, gritty B-movie feel. Okay, maybe not Escape from New York, but maybe Assault on Precinct 13 Carpenter.
Okay.
Oh yeah, definitely that. Yeah.
I loved Ethan Hawke in that film. He was.
Did you ever watch Triple Nine?
I just said that. Said that as a
Triple
joke.
Nine's awesome.
Triple Nine is
so awesome.
I wanted to get
God,
a rise out of
I
Bruce.
love Triple Nine. Can we talk about guys? Can we talk about Triple Nine?
We're
For
gonna
the rest of the show, can we just talk about how awesome Triple Nine is?
Triple Nine,
so fun. Oh my God.
We're gonna talk about Triple Nine, Eric. Before we, so those
kill
are your
a cop.
two picks.
I kill a cop just like that, man.
So VFW Driveways is Bruce's rewind rewatches. I mean, not rewatch, rewind picks. Eric, Hardline Holmes, can you talk about what you did about rewind before? We could do a whole 999 segment here, but
seriously.
Yeah, I love that. You know, that's one of those movies where I actually saw that with Anderson, and we walked out of that movie, and we were both mixed. and I gave it. I threw a couple of shots at that movie, and then and as I'm driving home, I'm thinking, did I just give a bad review to a mediocre review? And what I felt like I just said something stupid because I was wrong.
You just gave a bad review to a masterpiece, is what you did.
Yeah, and this is coming from.
All right, that might be a bit much, but Triple Nine is.
Luis, what am I called again?
4-star Greg.
4-star Greg, and 4-star Greg doesn't have not too smart. But Eric Holmes, what are your rewind picks for this week?
I got one rewind pick. It's a movie directed by Jesse V. Johnson, and it's called starring Scott Adkins, starring Avengement. And I don't know if this counts as a rewind. Greg definitely talked about it last episode, and you were talking about the other guy. I think it's the guy that plays his brother.
Right, Craig Fairbrass. He's in this movie called Villain, which came out last week.
I recognize his name, but he's one of those guys that, like, I see him and I'm like, okay, yeah, I've known him. But Scott Adkins is what's told me because I fucking love Scott Adkins. Scott Adkins is so fucking good. If
you agree with us, you like Scott Adkins as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. This was a freaking great movie too, by the way.
Look in my eyes. Look in my eyes.
Okay.
If you love action,
I
even a little bit.
If you like 999,
how many times have you said, I want to get an action movie? They don't make them like they do in the 80s anymore. They do. Right. And they're starring Scott Adkins, and they're usually straight to video, but it doesn't fucking matter because they're fucking amazing. Watch Undisputed 2, 3, Boyka. Scott Adkins playing Boyka is one of the greatest action characters, not ever, because in rapid fire. But besides that, Boyka is one of the second greatest action movie characters ever. And I always knew that Scott Adkins was a great actor. He's obviously a great martial artist. He's a great fighter. The moves he does in Undisputed 2 and 3, where he comes across, they miss the first leg, and he comes in and kicks him with the second leg, and they slow it down. It's like, oh, that's so fucking cool. His character in Avengement, that's Scott Adkins can fucking drop the mic and walk away and never make another movie again. He fucking nails it in Avengement. Avengement is a great fucking movie, and everyone needs to watch Avengement yesterday. That's how great this movie is.
Well, it's a simple story. Avengement, Scott Adkins is...
don't give anything away. Don't give anything.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
Do not give anything away.
I'm going to shut up then.
See, here's the thing about action movies. Action movies usually have really shit stories. Let's be honest. Yeah. The stories doesn't matter. It's like what I said with comedies. Comedies, the story is just something to hang jokes on.
Yeah.
And an Adam Sandler movie. Story sucks, but it doesn't matter. You're not watching an Adam Sandler movie to watch the story. You're watching Adam Sandler movie to watch the jokes, unless it's like something like Uncut Gems or Punch Drunk Love or Spanglish or
I will always say Click when we talk about Adam Sandler, by the way. I'm just gonna say Click is a masterpiece as well.
Oh yeah, all in on Click.
Oh my god, yes.
As Bruce laughs. Wait, have you seen Click, Bruce?
I've seen Click.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dude, that movie is awesome. That gets me in the feels every time, dude. You want to see me
Bruce is laughing.
Cry?
I was crying too. I'm crying. Yeah, Bruce.
You want to see you cry? Watch Click. I want to see you cry watching Avengement, because Scott Adkins' character in that movie is one of that. Oh God, fucking God, he's so fucking good in that movie. He's got the what do you call that? Not the pikey. I guess that's guess.
Well, I'm not going to give per your request, Eric. Hardline. I'm not going to give the plot details. What I will say about Avengement, though, is name dropping number 2 of the segment. Is I did interview the director Jesse V. Johnson. First of all, Scott Adkins says, to your point, Eric Hardline, is that Avengement is his favorite performance. It's his favorite film of what he's done.
It shows. It really freaking shows. Like that.
And it sounds like a low bar to clear, because Scott Adkins is mostly known for doing straight to DVD movies, but he's actually a good actor.
He is.
Like, you watch him in a movie, like the movies are action, whatever, but I always saw him in movies. I'm like, dude, you get him with the right director, he's gonna fucking nail it. And in Avengement, he fucking nailed it. It's so good. I love Avengement so much.
To up the ante to Lewis's point, is this Lewis, the pure cinephile. I interviewed Jesse for name dropping for Avengement, and I asked him about his favorite movies, and he said his 2 favorite movies are Seven Samurai.
Rapid Fire? Oh, sorry.
Can we just do Rapid Fire, 999, and Hardline? The rest of our existence, we'll just continue to do that.
I'm gonna do a straight rewind episode where it's only rewinds.
And by the way, to your point, Lewis, I was thinking about your Lost City review from last week. I love Andy Garcia. We should sprinkle as much Andy Garcia coverage as we can on this podcast. But he said Seven Samurai is his favorite film, along with The Searchers, and he said Avengement, to Hardline's point, it's actually one of those movies that he felt like he doesn't consider himself Kurosawa, but he's a huge cinephile, and that's what he and Scott were pulling for with Avengement, which means, Bruce, that might be Bruce's next pick for next week. Yeah, you're.
I wrote it down. I wrote down Avengement. So, and I actually added it to my. I added it to my Netflix playlist today. So I just hadn't had time to get it like rolling, but I'm pretty sure I'll be watching it by next week. I don't know if I will. I will rewind it, but.
Eric, you have one more pick before we get to Lewis.
No, I need to change my pants when we're done with this, but I'm done with my rewinds. Avengement, go watch Avengement. Fucking watch Avengement. Scott Adkins is awesome in Avengement, and Jesse V. Johnson is a son of Christ. That's how good that movie is.
You know I'm sending this video to their people. They're just gonna love this.
It is so much fun, dude.
Send it to anybody. God. This movie is so good. I will stand by this movie. Yes. I will go to the mat for this movie. I won't die for this movie because I got shit to do tomorrow, but I will do a lot of bad things for this movie.
Lewis, what did you rewind?
I have
this
to
week?
Follow that.
But you know what? You have Kubrick on your shirt, so you're basically 95% right in anyway. So you're good. Yeah.
So I'm actually bringing the stuff. I fucking love this. This is Attack of the Killer Cream Cheese, and it is glorious, dude. It is so fucking fun. It reminds me of They Live mixed with so much B films that you just enjoy it every second of it. The one-liners are glorious, and it just brings me back to that Larry Cohen-esque feel of again. And I miss being in the Larry Cohen world because it is so much fun, and I'm so excited to go down the deep well that is Larry Cohen and all his films now. So
okay,
excited.
And you saw the documentary. Everyone, I guess I'm the only one who didn't see the documentary King Cohen.
Dude, it is so much fun. Oh my God. And he gets called out so many times for exaggerating in the best way possible.
We should probably actually do an actual review on that, because I don't think we actually talked about King Cohen, but
yeah, that's a good one.
I don't know, maybe we have one where all four, after Greg's seen it, we all four of us just hit up King Cohen and maybe
that'll be good.
Just do a review on King Cohen.
Or maybe
that on its own.
Well, I'm all about the dick, so I think you should definitely do the death of Dick Long down the road too. That's something. Don't you do?
Choice of words, man. Choice of words.
So me and the words really bad.
Can we change that to Greg quote all about the dicks?
Yeah, I might change that, because it's whether it's dick or it's hammer, I'm all about it. Put the words together, and we have Bruce's segment. What a way to horribly transition, because I'm a horrible moderator, to
you're listening to Dick Hammer.
That sounds like a great private eye. That's
Hammer
better
Dick.
than Mickey. Yeah, that's better than Mickey Spillane. So, Purkey, Brucifer. I'm sorry, but you know what, Brucifer, we have some. The reason why I'm calling him Brucifer is because his name is on that screen as Brucifer, just like Hardline Holmes is, and I'm a horrible moderator. And okay, so Brucifer, what do you have for Hammer? You have a couple of things that you want to talk to Hammer.
Yeah,
why Hammer this week? Are you really passionate about Hammer?
Oh, Hammer. I'm a horror fan. Obviously, that we talked about that some. I mean, I'm not only that, but definitely had a huge impact on me, and especially in the 80s and 70s and everything. But I mean, for me, I kept looking back, and Hammer was. And I come from the era right when videotapes were starting and right before videotapes, and you had to get your midnight movies on like Owl Theater or whatever it was on your TV. You have to wait up to like 10 or 11 or 12 at night to watch it. And anytime a Hammer movie was coming up, you knew you were in for something pretty good. And it's a B movie for sure. But to me, I look at Hammer as like that transition where you have the prestige movies that are starting to kind of change horror. Like you got Psychos and you've got, Rosemary's Baby, and you got all this stuff happening in the 60s. But Hammer is like your meat and potatoes. It's taking the old school horror franchise, all those Universal movies, your Frankensteins and Draculas and Werewolves and Mummy, all of them. It's turning them into bright color. It's giving them good production for a B movie. It's adding cleavage, blood, dismemberment, and things that you wouldn't see that much in the late 50s and 60s. And it really was kind of like, EC Comics. If you heard EC Comics. EC Comics were like all your Tales from the Crypt and Vault of Horror. And they were like, the kids would sneak them because they were like lurid and they were like bad and they were getting banned. And Hammer films are kind of like the movie version of that. I figure in the 60s, you've got Hammer, you've got like Roger Corman, and you've got like Russ Meyer. And those are kind of the transgressive B movies that are influencing like so many filmmakers. And that's kind of, I guess, my start. The only thing I would say about them is by the time they were really hitting their stride and doing a lot of their horror in the 60s, especially, they kind of had like an acting troupe. They had a whole group of directors and actors that would appear in a lot of the movies, especially Peter Cushing, which everyone knows eventually ended up in Star Wars as Grand Moff Tarkin in the original Star Wars, and Christopher Lee. Yes. And of course, the great Christopher Lee became a star from Hammer movies, and of course went on to greatness in so many other movies. Most notably, of course, the Lord of the you got the Rings trilogy. He was in at least one or two of them, right?
Oh wow, nice.
And the Great Wicker Man. If you've never seen that, he's amazing in the original Wicker Man.
Was Vincent Price part of the whole Hammer thing, or is that a dumb question?
No. See, Vincent Price is kind of the other side of that, right? So Vincent Price is in the Corman movies. So he's in all the Edgar Allan Poe movies.
Sure. Yeah.
But Edgar Allan Poe movies were like always trying to be a little more. They were still pretty lurid too, but they were a little more artistic,
Got it.
And then it was a Tim Burton versus like the Eli Roths.
Or I would say more like Tim Burton versus like Sam Raimi.
Sure.
So, but I mean, the only thing I would bring about them is that they did a lot of their stuff in this place called Bray Studios. They had their own studios. Like they would repurpose this building over and over again. And if you start noticing it, you'll notice the same courtyard, the same studio, and they're using it for everything. And they also used Oakley Court, which is this big, scary-looking mansion, which appeared as the mansion in Rocky Horror Picture Show. Oh. And they used that for Dracula's castle and various other castles. Anyway, so first movie I will start with. So I'm not going to do all the famous Frankensteins and Draculas. But I will start with a version of I would call it their boobs and blood era, which is the late 60s, early 70s, where they started to get nudity included in them as well. And they made in 1972 a little movie called Vampire Circus, which is a really weird vampire movie. It was directed by Robert Young. And it's basically, there's a vampire that lives in the castle near the town, right? And he's killing the kids. They go in there and they kill him, put a stake through his heart, and burn the castle. And he, on his dying breath, he's like, I'm going to curse your kids, and I'm going to kill your children and get my life back. And then, years later, there's a plague in the town, and in rolls the Circus, which is his cousin and a bunch of other gypsies. And there's a big strong man played by David Prowse.
Oh, very cool. Nice. Yeah.
Oh, where do I know that name from?
And for anyone who doesn't know, David Prowse is inside Darth Vader suit in all of the original Star Wars movies, and he is in the great Clockwork Orange as the strongman helper in the house that gets invaded by them.
I thought Amidala was inside Darth Vader, but go on.
Yeah, he's in Darth Vader. He plays Darth Vader, except for the voice. And he also is in the Horror of Frankenstein, I want to say, too. But in this one, he's like the strong man in the circus, so he's pretty cool. The other one, the notable person in this movie, well, there's two notable people, but is Adrienne Corey, and she plays the main gypsy that kind of rolls in. She's kind of the ringleader of the circus. She is the wife of the man that gets home invaded in A Clockwork Orange.
Oh.
Right.
Very bad
spandex.
Yes.
Yes.
So two actors in this movie are in A Clockwork Orange.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Wow.
So anyway,
that's a way to describe it. She gets home invaded. We can skip this part.
Singing in the rain. Yes.
And this is where I want to pull out my mask with the.
Yeah.
Don't say pull out now, please.
You can only take so much, right?
All right, cut all this.
Wow, there are quadruple entendres here. This is to the nth degree.
It's all them. I didn't do it.
Okay.
I regret everything I said in the last 2 minutes. Go.
I regret nothing.
Oh, nice. So, Vampire Circus. Where is this available?
This one is actually on Amazon Prime, so you can just watch it today on Amazon Prime if you want.
Cool.
It's surprisingly violent for even the Hammer films. There's a lot of weird and interesting violence, and it's really weird for a vampire movie too because they have shapeshifters in there that can turn into like panthers, and there's a whole scene where this really bad panther kind of puppet head is attacking somebody and tearing them apart. And then you have acrobats that turn into bats, and it's a really bizarre and trippy vampire movie that doesn't quite fit the genre very well, but also makes it way more interesting than it has any right to be.
That's awesome.
So it is probably the least good of the three I'm going to mention, but is also a really interesting oddity, especially if you're into Hammer, to check out this just weird movie. And the only other thing I'll mention is this is kind of in the era, and I'll kind of put it in the line of a whole bunch of movies. They made a bunch of movies kind of along this line. They made Twins of Evil, The Vampire Lovers, Lust for the Vampire. Was that?
I've seen Twins of Evil out of that.
Yeah, Twins of Evil is actually pretty good too. Yeah. And that has Peter Cushing in it again. And that one, he's like a puritanical, like almost like a puritanical dad figure. And he's angry because one of the daughters is going... he has the two twin nieces or something that come to live with him.
That's him. That's right.
Yeah.
Holy crap! Completely went over my head when I first saw it.
And then the only other one, this is a great. Just want to bring it as a great title as in kind of that era is Dr. Jekyll and Sister Hyde.
Nice.
All right, we'll move on after this. I'll come back to another one.
Cool. Eric Holmes, Hardline Holmes. What do you got? You always come up with a very interesting, at least a couple of interesting picks every week.
Well, I heard that Bruce was going to do some Hammer movies, and so I figure I'd jump in on the fun. I have a little bit of a Dunning-Kruger effect as far as Hammer goes. If you would have asked me a week ago, I would have said, oh, yeah, I saw almost all of them, thinking there was 15 or so. There's like over 200, 700, even more than that. Jesus. Okay, so we cannot even scratch the surface of Hammer even today. Okay. So I submit maybe we should double up on this again some other time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe every October might be a good Hammer Halloween might be a thing.
For all 4 weeks.
There you go. And then after 100 years and we're all dead and gone, we might finally get through all of them. I'll start with my favorite of the two I saw this week. Legend of the Werewolf came out in 1975, directed by Freddie Francis. It's got Peter Cushing. Freddie Francis, I looked up the movies he directed, and there's not a lot that really jump out. but he was a cinematographer. He's known as a cinematographer. He did the cinematography for Glory, Cape Fear, a bunch of David Lynch movies, Dune, Elephant Man, Straight Story.
And we covered Freddie for, I think Bruce started with The Innocents. Freddie Francis is the cinematographer for The Innocents. And no, but I'm glad you're mentioning Freddie Francis, is because I completely forgot about how genius this guy was, and I'm so glad that you're actually spotlighting his film right now.
But yeah, that was by complete accident, by the way. But Legend of the Werewolf. It's there's not much to it. It's pretty like most good genres. It just focuses on what it is and doesn't try to church it up a lot. This is a kid was raised by wolves, and then traveling. Oh, you wouldn't call it circus. What were the people that step right up? Look at the woman with the lizard head.
Carnival Barker.
Right.
Bat. Look at the bat ears on his face. You know, whatever it is. But he's wolf boy.
But that's wrong.
Kind of something like that. But yeah, I guess Carnival Barker. I guess you might call him.
That's a better term. Yeah.
And he picks up this kid because one of the guys was hunting a rabbit, and the kid grabs the rabbit and eats it. And he's like, "You stole my rabbit! You stole my dinner, you little shit!" And then they catch him, and they're like, "Oh, we'll advertise him as the feral child, or the wolf child, or whatever it is."
Nice.
And then, of course, he gets older, and they can't do that anymore because here's a guy that's crazy, But anywho, as he gets older, they find out that he has, he's got kind of werewolf tendencies. In certain times, he turns into a werewolf, and then it just becomes a werewolf movie after that. They definitely play with the fact that he was raised by wolves. So there's a point where, we got to get rid of these wolves. They're a liability. What do I do with them? Well, you got to kill them. And of course, he doesn't want to do it because in his mind, he's not a human. He's a wolf. These are the ones that raise him. So he's kind of torn by that. They got a little bit of that, but more than not, it's a werewolf movie. And it's a pretty decent werewolf movie. The only problem I have is when they go into the point of view of the werewolf, it's red on red, which is really hard to see. And so the point of view of the werewolf looks kind of bad, but it's a small fart in the wind that I wouldn't worry about. Legend of the Werewolf, 1975. Not a bad Hammer movie. I would check it out.
How does it look? Is it a cheesy looking movie? Because when you say Freddie Francis, I'm thinking, well, obviously two different movies. I'm thinking The Innocents, which I can watch over and over again. But
again, I mentioned my Dunning-Kruger, where I thought I know more about Hammer than I do. The ones that I've seen, they all kind of look the same. It's probably to what Bruce said, where they all shoot on similar studios. They all have similar crew. But I honestly, of the Hammer movies I've seen, I have not seen many that deviate from that specific look.
Mm-hmm.
And
cool.
When we get to any of the other 700 movies they make, I may be proved wrong, but of the ones I've seen, they all kind of have a really similar patina to them, if you'll call it that.
I think there's like one or two directors that distinguish themselves and get out of the Hammer films that made a kind of differential in the style and everything, but I don't think they really deviate, at least from the ones I've seen either. So
cool. Luis, what you got for the...
All right, so I have this glorious movie that it's from 2010, and it is an inanimate object that comes to life. This movie is Rubber. This is a tire that comes to life and attacks people, and it's all shot in the point of view of the tire. There is very little dialogue, and this is fun as fuck. This is one of those just pure adrenaline. Just go with it. It is ridiculous. There is no reason for this movie. Just enjoy the show, and it delivers in every part of it. It feels like a horror film or suspense thriller type of thing from the 1960s, 1970s era. it is what it is, and it is very self-aware, which
Rubber.
is so
Wow.
much fun. Yeah.
Where did you see it?
That one is actually streaming on Hoopla.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's a
Rubber.
free streaming
In the
service.
hoopla.
I'm just wondering, maybe Anderson mentioned it years ago. I don't know. I think I might have heard of Rubber a long time ago.
Oh yeah. I
think-
saw this years ago too, but I rewatched it and it's so worth it. So worth it.
I feel like Anderson has mentioned Rubber. I know I've seen Rubber too.
Yeah.
It's made by this guy. I forget who he is, but he's like a French.
Quentin Despiau or
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wapu. Nailed it.
It's definitely
It's like seven. What is it? 70? Yeah. Is it what? 70 minutes or something? Or very quick?
It's very it's an
Okay.
hour and 20 minutes. So yeah.
Okay.
It barely reaches that full feature film length, but it is perfect. There is no fat on this film, and at the very end, it is very self-aware, and it just kind of makes fun of itself, which is just great. And
Very cool.
it's a fun adventure. Honestly, just turn off your brain and enjoy because it's well worth it.
Yeah. I have one pick. My pick is this film that when I saw it, I gave it 5 out of 5 stars, which I guess to most people is 3 out of 5 stars. But
Say that again. 5 out of 5?
5 out of 5. I may have.
Ladies and gentlemen, you are listening to Hardline Mainline, and Greg Srisavasdi just gave a movie 5 out of 5 stars.
Yes. And yes, I did give it 5 out of 5 stars. And it's so interesting, Hardline Holmes, that you're exactly sounding like that, because this is exactly the way I mean this in a very, very serious fashion, because this is kind of what Thevastofnight is all about. Because it centers on a radio DJ. His name is played by what is his name? Jake Horowitz. He plays radio DJ. His name's Everett. Okay, and it's set in, I think, in the late 1950s in New Mexico, in a small town in New Mexico. It's radio DJ. He's friends with the switchboard operator, and her name is Faye, and she's played by Sierra McCormick. So it's basically a two-hander, Sierra McCormick and Jake Horowitz. They play buddies. And it's called Thevastofnight. It comes out on Amazon Prime Video on May 29th. It's I think it won some kind of best narrative feature or some kind of award in Slamdance. Okay. Now, when you think of Slamdance, you think of really indie films, but that's not a bad thing. But this movie, Thevastofnight, I think if it was just entered in a main competition, it would just, and we weren't in the middle of where we are right now, this movie would be one of those indies you have to watch in the theaters. By the way, I'm never going to a theater ever again because I'm a scared, fearful human being. But that doesn't detract from how amazing Thevastofnight is. The reason why I was so crazy in love with this movie, which is directed by Andrew Patterson. It's his first film. It's a series of long takes. There's a lot of Warner's long takes. Maybe there's some cheats within the long takes, which I don't know because I'm not like you, Eric, or Anderson Cowan. I'm not a filmmaker. Yeah, Anderson knows when they do the cheats. Probably you guys know better than me, but when you get into the movie, it's a very fluid camera work within the first 5 minutes. Nice. And on top of the long takes, you have a lot of overlapping dialogue. So imagine if you have the long take from Atonement or a Brian De Palma film mixed in with His Girl Friday, Coen Brothers overlapping dialogue. Okay, that's like juggling. We're going back to the whole Dick Long thing, and we're juggling a lot of balls here. There's a lot of ball juggling in this movie from the cinema. Okay, there's a lot of that kind of stuff. I'm just gonna run with that theme. Okay, we gotta stick it to that theme.
Great, clean it up, potty mouth.
I will clean it up later. I just don't have the right stuff to. Okay, that's
mop and bucket, man. Mop
and bucket. But Thevastofnight, you think it's going to be this great, interesting cinematic flourish of just wonders, and it would still exist as a 4 and a 4.5 star film, but it's actually, the premise is the switchboard operator, she hears an alien like some kind of voice, some kind of radio frequency, and she thinks it might be something's going on in the town, and ultimately you find out, it's not a spoiler, that maybe this radio frequency, and this is why we're coming up here. There's a lot of radio references in this movie, and it's all about the joy of audio, even though Thevastofnight is a very visually enticing movie. And there's also a little bit of a misdirection. It might be a little bit of a homage to Close Encounters of the Third Kind without giving too much away. But what made Close Encounters of the Third Kind such a special film, at least for me, I'm sure for a lot of you guys, is the human factor of, by the time we're figuring out what's going to happen. Yeah, you feel the family dynamic and how it affects them. This is the same thing. You get just invested in these two people and their fates. And by the time whatever happens at the end happens, you're like, oh, I hope that they make it out alive, and I hope this town is okay. And there are a bunch of two long monologues. We're going back to Driveways with the monologues there, Bruce, but there's some really interesting long monologues where it's with a static camera, and they pull it off. It could have completely been boring, but the biggest misdirection of Thevastofnight is amidst all the overlapping dialogue and the long takes and the wonders and showing how Andrew type of gig after Thevastofnight. It's so promising. By the way, Steven Soderbergh loves this movie, so he's already going to kick it up. He's probably getting so many offers right now as we speak. The biggest misdirection is the best part of Thevastofnight is when the camera is still and you actually learn about the people in the town. It's just blew me away. I have no idea who Sierra McCormick or Jake Horowitz is. I interviewed Horowitz several days ago, but they were, I mean, it's one of these things where, to me, no-name actors, I had no idea who they were, and they both knocked it out of the park. This is quite the film. I'm so excited for you guys to watch it on Amazon Prime Video, and we can talk about Thevastofnight next week for our Rewind segment. So I don't know if you guys are going to go 5 out of 5 like I did, but I can guarantee that at least you guys are not going to go lower than a 4 on this film.
Well, you definitely sold me on it for sure.
Yeah, seriously. Yeah. When does it come out?
Yep.
May 29th on Amazon Prime Video, Thevastofnight. It is, and it's an indie film. And it's one of those things. I think in one of our earlier episodes, we were talking about how some silent films like maybe Fritz Lang and M, you look at that budget and you see how visually arresting it is compared to $100 million films now. And you look at Thevastofnight and you go, wow, this movie is more interesting visually than most of the studio-driven, I don't want to say direct, most of the studio-driven fare that we are accustomed to. So I just can't wait for you guys to see Thevastofnight. I can't wait to watch some more, to actually start watching Hammer films. I remember watching Hammer films when I was a little kid. They don't have too much of an, I just remember the blood. I remember guys like maybe, I think his name was Cameron Mitchell, something like that. But Christopher Lee, I remember blood. I remember boobs. I remember just gory stuff. What else do you have for us, Bruce, regarding Hammer? What's your second pick?
My second pick is from 1965. After Psycho, they did a whole series of kind of Psycho-esque movies. It was kind of a thing, and a lot of studios were coming out with their own versions of that. And they did ones called like Paranoiac. They did Maniac, Fanatic, Hysteria. But the one I'm featuring is The Nanny from 1965, starring the great and wonderful Bette Davis. And it is a great little thriller psychological movie, and it really is unusual for Hammer. It's black and white, which is kind of unusual right there. It's not gothic. It's in current times, 1965. And it basically starts with that there's this couple, and they're worried. The wife is worried because their son is coming home, and their son has been basically in a school for troubled youths / mentally troubled youths. And the introduction you get to him is they're going to get him to pick him up and take him back home. And the nanny, of course, is Bette Davis. And they go to pick him up, and the caretaker or whatever, the woman who works there at that home for kids, goes and opens the door, and he's hanging. He's hanging in the room. And then he laughs because he's been pretending to hang to get under her skin.
Wow.
And that's your introduction to this kid. And he goes back, and he's just totally like one of the most horrible kids you've ever seen. He hates Betty Davis, and you can just see Betty Davis is just like coiled tension. And you know how Betty Davis is. You can just see in the way she's just like holding it in, and she has to be, yes, master, whatever, you know what his name, whatever his name, she has to do what he wants to do. And he's played by William Dix, just to go back to Greg's day, whose only other thing I could really find that he was known for is Dr. Dolittle. He was in the original Dr. Dolittle film as a little kid. But even more interestingly, so there's a great kind of a sub story in this. So this kid hates her, and she obviously kind of hates him, but isn't really saying much about it. And he'll keep escaping out onto the fire escape, and he can get out there and he can look over the city and whatever. And a girl from upstairs comes down to meet him, so he ends up going up to her room, and she's a little older than him. He's like, I don't know, 9 or 10. She's probably like early teens, like 13 or 14. And she's played by Pamela Franklin, who was Flora in The Innocents. She is also a great actress in later movies, like she's in The Legend of Hell House with the great Roddy McDowell. She is awesome. And in this, she is like that, almost like that mod early teen girl that would be into the Beatles and the Who and stuff. And she's sitting in her room smoking. So she's like really cool to him, and she's kind of his ally. Anyway, as the story goes on, it's really good. And there's a reveal of what happened. The whole tension is all around the death of this boy's little sister, and he's blamed for it. And there's a question on who is at fault. He blames the nanny blames him. The mom's kind of going crazy, and it just builds and builds and builds, and they start layering in flashbacks onto what happened. And each time they layer one in, you get a different level of what's going on. And it's really, really good little thriller for that era, and it has a very, very satisfying payoff and an amazing performance by Betty Davis in a career of amazing performances, but one that you probably never hear about. This is post Baby Jane. Yeah, it's a Hammer film.
I didn't know that.
Yep.
I saw this when I was like probably 12, 13. And I was like, when you're mentioning the hanging thing and they were faking out, I was like, is this the one that I'm thinking of? And then I started looking through the picture. I was like, oh yes, this is the one that I was thinking of. Holy crap. I didn't think that was a Hammer film.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it's not like gothic or sexual really. No. It's not even really bloody violent, but there's a couple disturbing scenes that still hold some potency in this movie that you'll be like, oh wow, that's kind of messed up. So yeah, it's good. It's a good movie. It's solid.
Where did you see it? Is it on Amazon Prime Video?
This one is one of those that you can find in various places. It's one of those ones where you can find like on YouTube, and you can find versions of it incomplete. Like it's not, I don't think, fully domain, but it's available out there. You can search for a full movie and it'll pop up in several places.
And it's on Amazon Prime too.
Yeah, it's really good.
When I was a kid, I remember, I think I was 10 or 11, and Kim Carnes came out with that song. What, she's got Betty Davis's eyes, Betty Davis eyes, or Betty Davis's eyes. And also around that year, maybe a year later, Mommy Dearest came out. And for some weird reason, when you're a kid, there are sort of just things that really affect you. And I remember Mommy Dearest was a movie that I didn't want to watch because it seemed like so intimidating. Joan Crawford, and I saw her in that Trog when I was a kid, and I was like, Trog is weird. And she seemed, what is she doing in this movie Trog? And that's Joan Crawford. But between that Kim Carnes song and Betty Davis, as a kid, I was trained to just think that Betty Davis was intimidating with those eyes and all that stuff. And I, even now, close to 50, I probably one of the reasons why I haven't revisited or seen a lot of Betty Davis's movies is because of that Kim Carnes song and my childhood fixation on Betty Davis being so intimidating. I recently saw one, I think it was called Another Man's Poison in 1951. And that's a very interesting Betty Davis film. But I'm so excited to watch. I mean, I've seen Dark Victory, a couple other things, but I still haven't seen All About Eve, Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, all that kind of stuff. So I'm really excited.
Baby Jane, it's Joan Crawford and Betty Davis. And it is one of the most psychotic movies ever made. It is insane. You need to watch it. Yeah. You want to see two actresses after their prime, chewing the scenery. Oh my God, that movie is just bonkers. It's so it's weird. It's crazy.
The Betty Davis movies I really want to see.
Status.
Yeah. Oh, you were saying what status?
Dr. Moreau status.
Dr. Moreau status. But to your point, one of the things that I was reading about how Betty Davis, some of her performances that were not as acclaimed, they were saying that one of the problems with some of Betty Davis's certain weaker performances was she was playing Betty Davis. She was playing her persona in the movie, and it shows. But even seeing an actor play a version of themselves, is their persona. I think, especially if you're Betty Davis, would be interesting to watch on a camp factor. So I think I'm going to start consuming a lot more of her stuff. Eric Holmes, you got some more Hammer stuff to stick to us, or?
I do. There's a 1971 movie directed by Piers Haggard, also known as Satan's Skin. This one's called Blood on Satan's Claw.
Wow.
And this is a great title for a movie, Blood on Satan's Claw.
It really is.
And this movie was dry as fuck. This was a dry movie. I like digs up a thing, like, look. Anyway, they dig up a thing, and it's like
sound effects.
Hair.
It's good sound effects.
Someone's got blood on Satan's claw, or
you might hear some dog in the background of my house. There's some dog barking going on, but
it's good.
But someone finds like a skull thing with an eyeball on it and some hair, and then a bunch of what do you call them? Important people talk about things. And then they cut to another scene with more important people talking about things. At this point, I'm like, oh, this is very interesting. Let's hear what they got to say about things. And then they start talking about more things. And then someone's got like a chunk of hair on him. It's like, he's got the mark of the beast or whatever. Probably don't even say that. I don't know. I was asleep most of the time. But then after that, more people are talking about more important things. And guys, listen to this. The things that these guys are talking about is very important, and this movie is really good.
So too much exposition. Is that what you're saying?
I could not get into this movie. This movie
dialogue
really
runs around in circles and circles and circles.
Now, I will say this. This is really similar to how Jellos work, where sometimes, like, if you're not in the mood for a Jello, you're not gonna get on board ever. And I don't think I was in the right headspace to get this one, but as it was, and I've seen like Joe Dante had a thing about it on the Trailers from Hell, and he was talking it up, and apparently it's a popular Hammer film. Like
it is. It's really worth it, Eric. I think you should rewatch it when you have.
I think so too, because it just I was not feeling it at all, and
you gotta
it was just
really
like
listen to the dialogue though, because a lot of it it's.
I was, and it was
jokes.
really, really interesting. It was very interesting. Of everything I heard was the most interesting dialogue I've ever heard of any movie.
But Louis, you thought it was okay as far as the exposition stuff?
I mean, I just remember watching it with a bunch of people drinking, so that take it like that.
Maybe
that's an impaired review. That's an impaired review there, Louis.
To Lewis's point, I don't think I was in the right headspace when I was watching this, because I saw this earlier in the week and it just did not grab me. And maybe I'll hit it up again. Maybe I'll even hit it up again this week and do a rewind on it. And it's like, no, I was wrong. It was brilliant. Or maybe I'll come back and say, no, this one was boring, but this did not grab me at all.
No pun intended, Bruce, but have you seen The Blood on Satan's Claw?
Maybe. I mean, there's an era where I was watching a ton of them, but I don't remember it. It was probably in my original run, which was like late 70s, so God knows. But I haven't seen it definitely in like 35 years or 40 years, so I don't remember it, honestly.
Well, Louis, I'm gonna throw in the most horrible pun in 5 episodes. I'm getting really tired of your picks.
Wow.
What's your next?
So the next
let the rubber hit the road and give me
Don't drop that name. Don't drop that name. Drop that mic. That was awesome.
So the next one is about a mirror that comes to life. And this
is there a theme going on here?
Yes, it's shit that you don't fuck with. You don't fuck with this. Yes, Oculus. Mike Flanagan, which has become a fucking great director in recent years. Like, this guy has done amazing movies right after each other. And on top of that, it stars Karen Gillan, which Doctor Who, Guardians of the Galaxy, and a whole bunch of other movies as well. Jumanji, the Jumanji franchise.
Rory Cochrane's in it, right? Rory Cochrane.
Yes.
I'm all about the Cochrane. So
and,
I do mean
Katie
that he's a great actor.
Katie Sackhoff from Battlestar Galactica fame. She's in this as well. And it's basically this mirror that is possessed and drives the family, in particular the father, to insanity. And this is very much like The Shining-esque. And you could see Mike Flanagan's obsession with The Shining in this film because he actually wrote it as well. And it grabs your attention. From the beginning, you're sold on these kids. And the adventure just keeps going deeper and deeper. And when you expect it to end, it keeps going. And you're like, holy shit, this is really going down the rabbit hole of this. And it's intriguing. It's suspenseful. If you haven't seen the Haunting of Hill House, this is very much like that. It keeps you on the edge. It's a white knuckler. The whole time you're like, oh shit, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? Is this really going to... He sends you off on a bunch of like goose chases, and it's just fun. I love this type of film. This is thriller done right. And you don't fuck with a mirror that's possessed. Just don't do it. Same way that you don't fuck with the tire that's running out on its own. You don't want to do that because you're going to get your ass eaten. So yeah, this is a phenomenal pick. And this one is actually streaming on Hulu and Hoopla as well.
Oh, wow. Cool. Oculus. And you are, like you said, you already knew. I guess probably the first time you saw it, Lewis, was when maybe it came out. And did you know?
Oh, yeah.
So did you know that he was going to go places after that, Mike Flanagan, after that movie?
I thought so. And I was like, okay, let's see what his next film is. And then I was like, holy shit. It really hit me with Haunting of Hill House, though. When I saw that, that is probably top 5 TV series of all time for me. I love that little series. It is just so well done. And for me to actually get shocked in a movie like that just like completely like, oh shit, that just happened. That is a rarity. And that show made me, it happened twice in the show. So Mike Flanagan knows how to throw it down. And he definitely, I watch everything that he comes out with because it's just, I know it's going to be good. So
we see Gerald's Game.
Yes, that was fun.
What
I thought it was a pretty good rendition of the book. You ever read the book?
Yeah.
My friend Gabe told me about it. He was like, "This is one of the few things that like you just told me about it, and like the way he described it stuck in my head." I'm like, "Oh, that sounds fucked up. I should watch it sometimes." Especially when he talks about like sticking his hands in the dry bones, and the dust comes up. And describes all that, and I'd never read it. And then I saw Gerald's Game came out, and someone said it was good, and I checked it out. I'm like, holy shit, this is a fucking book he was talking about. But yeah, dude. And Gerald's Game is great.
Before I Wake, that's another really really good one. That one's on, I think, on Netflix too. And then Hush, the one that just. A transparent house, all window house in the woods is never a good idea. Why would you do that? Yeah.
I remember.
It's killer. Yeah. It's just, come on. You're going to get a killer to come out after you at that point. You're every cliche,
Yeah. I'm glad you picked this because, Eric, you were mentioning William Lindis and the Movie Bears podcast at the beginning of our podcast. And a friend of ours, a friend of the show, and podcaster himself, Andrew Martin. I remember when he did Andrew Watches Movies a couple years back, and
please come back. Andrew Watches Movies.
Yeah,
please come back.
Andrew Martin needs to come back and do Andrew Watches Movies. I just love listening to his he would just do that stuff solo on the mic. I can barely even do that. He's very talented on the podcasting space. But I remember him really, to your point, Luis, him really saying how much emotionally involved he got into Before I Wake, and I'm thankful for your recommendation for Oculus, because I want to see Oculus. I've been meaning to get into Before I Wake because he was talking. I remember specifically him saying it's not your average your straight ahead horror movie. There's a lot more.
Yeah, and that's the same thing with Mike Flanagan across the board. Every film that he's been involved in, there's more layers to it than just a regular genre film. And to tie it in with Clockwork Orange, actually, I met Karen Gillian, name drop, at one of the conventions down in South Florida, and she actually tapped me on the shoulder while I was waiting in line for Linda Blair.
Wow.
Meet Linda Blair. And then I was dressed like Alex from A Clockwork Orange in full cosplay and everything, and she's like, oh my God, I love this. That is glorious. So I have a picture with her with my Clockwork Orange outfit.
I want to see that picture. That is so cool. That is so very cool. That's so cool you cosplay too, because it just seems to me that just the biggest, just so much work to do.
It's fun though. Oh, so much fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Bruce, are you going to hammer it out one more time?
Yeah. One more. All right.
I'm sorry for beating this out way too much. Sorry.
This is another weird one. So the whole thing with Hammer, and Eric kind of mentioned this, is that they've been around since the 30s. They've been moving movies since the 30s. And they were doing a lot of like kind of, crime and noir-y sort of stuff and kind of almost serials. And then it wasn't until the 50s that they kind of broke out into the genre stuff. And I've always have a soft spot in my heart for like B sci-fi movies, like especially those like bug movies and alien movies and stuff in the 50s and 60s. And they got their start, really blew up when they took a TV series that was popular at the time and they turned it into a movie series. And it was called Quatermass. And Quatermass is the name of this, a professor. So Professor Quatermass. And he always is getting involved in some kind of extraterrestrial thing. In the 50s, they made two of them, but the one I'm going to talk about is my favorite of the three that they did, and it's 1967's Quatermass and the Pitt. It was named for America. It was named 5 Million Years to Earth. And it's a really unusual film, especially for Hammer, and one of the better like B sci-fi movies of that era that isn't, obviously 2001 is like this epic, groundbreaking movie. But for the B type movies, this is actually quite good and more interesting than your average movie. As far as connections, I didn't have a lot for the actors other than James Donald plays one of the two professors, not Quatermass. There's another professor in here too, and he is in The Great Escape. He's one of the kind of British dudes in The Great Escape. So if you see his face, you'll probably recognize him, Greg. He's one of the more minor characters in that movie. Anyway, cool. The basic concept of this is Hobbs End is a subway station, and they're going down there and they're digging it out. And they're going to make a new subway station there, right? It's just being dug and worked on. And they uncover some skulls, but the skulls look like Cro-Magnon skulls or like missing links. So it becomes this big like thing. Oh, we found these skulls, and they bring in the professors, and that's where the professors get brought in to look at these skulls. And as they're digging, they end up finding what they think is a big sewer pipe. And as they uncover it, it's like this large unknown metal ship. They're not sure what it is. And it ends up being this whole idea, which I have never heard discussed earlier than this, actually, and that is that aliens might have come to Earth millions of years ago, and they are finding this ship. And it's done really entertainingly, but also in kind of B-movie fashion. So you've got like, you got all kinds of stuff in this. They said this area was haunted for years, but now they're thinking like maybe it was because there was actually aliens there. And then there's like telekinetic stuff going on. There's all kinds of weird stuff in this. It's I'm not going to go into the whole like plot of it, other than to say that if you kind of like that sort of 50s, early 60s style of B movies, alien movies, and also this kind of mystery of uncovering like what is going on, it's got elements that are really, really fun and really interesting. And it's even got like satanic elements, like the idea that Satan might be actually something that happened scientifically that got misconstrued by ancient races and ancient cultures, that actually was something to do with aliens. So all that stuff is kind of unique for a movie of that era. And I don't know if you've ever heard of the Chariot of the Gods. That was a big thing in the 70s.
I think I remember
this whole
that, yeah.
idea that ancient aliens came to the world. And this predates all that. So it's kind of interesting to me that, like, I almost wondered how much Chariot of the Gods came out of this concept of Quatermass, because this had been a TV version before it was this movie version.
And what year was that?
This movie was 67, but I think the original TV series was in the 50s. So it's actually a remake of the TV show. You know, because they would do all this stuff on the BBC.
2001 was pretty similar concept about aliens visiting us in the past and basically shaping us as even
and this is way more B movie than obviously that is. But the idea that those concepts are in there is way more interesting than it should be for a movie of that era. And this movie is not, it's not streaming anywhere other than finding it like on YouTube or one of those kind of places. I mean, it's not streaming on anything that I could find. I mean, I have the DVD. That's the only way I have it. And this is probably out of print too. This is like one of those Anchor Bay. Anchor Bay used to release all this stuff back in the early 2000s.
I used to love Anchor Bay. My gosh.
Yeah.
Bruce, I think what you're describing as far as stuff in the movie like being discovered later on, I think that's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. I think that happens a lot with aliens, like the gray aliens that we all know of. The big gray heads, small mouths, big eyes. Like anytime anyone was abducted by an alien, they talk about a flying saucer and a beam of light got them. But that all comes from older movies and older stories and older pictures. And then, it gets put into the culture. And then when someone goes nuts and they tell an alien story, well, that's the alien they're describing, the one with the big head, the small mouth, and the big eyes. So I think it's less of a movie describing what happened or predicting something, and more of a self-fulfilling prophecy of someone saw the movie and then in their mind like, oh, this is a story I'm going to tell now.
It's like, what's the greatest disaster movie ever told or story ever told? It's the Bible. You know,
right?
So,
or the Bhagavad Gita.
Exactly, and that's
you want to go back further,
right? They have descriptions of aliens, the Greys, actually in what do you call it, that Indian scripture. So it's like it's freaking phenomenal, man.
Well, I think it's more of someone sees it in a movie, and then it just gets locked in the back of their head. Wendigo is the perfect example because I started writing a script about it, and so I did some research on it. And the Wendigo is, a lot of people see it as this big hulking thing with a deer head, with not a deer head, but like a deer skull. And apparently the story of the Wendigo had nothing to do with a deer skull. It was just a really, really skinny person that would eat other people. And someone made a horror movie, and I can't remember the name of it, but in the horror movie, the Wendigo had the deer skull. And then, so the Wendigo story thereon had been, the ancient Algonquin legend of Wendigo with the deer skull. It's like, that was not in the Algonquin legend. That came from a movie that came out in the 90s. And then, it just goes to show how stories can kind of affect culture in a way that, we think goes back further than it actually does, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I can totally see that. But, and the only other thing I was going to mention about this movie is I feel like, and I never heard anyone mention it in talking about Carpenter, but as much as Carpenter, when he was making The Thing, was influenced by the original story, his version of The Thing really was much closer to that. There's a scene in this movie that may have influenced him slightly. And there's a scene where they're doing an autopsy on an alien as they're trying to get it before it like rots away. And there's little hints there that really reminded me of some of those autopsy like scenes. I mean, it's much more rudimentary, but I have a feeling that Carpenter at some point probably ran across this movie, and it had kind of sunk into his conscious too, like you talked about, as part of his kind of alien movie experience. So it's an interesting one to check out if you ever get a chance.
I have a quick recommendation. My last recommendation is The Trip to Greece. The Trip to Greece just came out on cable VOD, digital, and, well, they say select theaters, but digital and cable VOD came out on May 22nd. I'm sure some of you guys have seen the Trip movies, which the trip to Spain, the trip to Italy. Wow, that's amazing. Well, Steve
Coogan?
Yeah, Steve Coogan and Rob Brydon. It's so funny, but but Steve Coogan and Rob Brydon, they're buddies. They actually play fiction, just I guess hyper real version of themselves. And what it is since Steve Coogan, he's a big star. You know, he plays just this. You know, he's best known overseas for Alan Partridge, and he was also recently in Stan and Ollie. He's been in Philomena. And he just plays just really kind of cocky, arrogant version of himself. And Rob Brydon is his buddy. Rob Brydon's best known for his light entertainment, comedic stuff. So the Trip movies before the Trip to Greece, I think there's been several of them. Stateside, we get the movies. But if you're living in, let's say, overseas in the UK, you get the actual TV series called The Trip. But for us, we just get an edited version of this TV series, and they come out in movie form. Okay? Really? So essentially what the Trip franchise is Rob Brydon and Steve Coogan. They travel together to just different parts of Europe, and they eat at different restaurants. So it's kind of like a culinary comedy where you see shots of different people making their meal, and it looks like one of these things that you'll see in Bravo or Top Chef. They serve them the meal, but while they're cooking, you see Rob Brydon and Steve Coogan just joking with each other, giving each other impressions of different actors, just talking crap to each other. So it's just a little bit of a banter back and forth. Think of it like the Richard Linklater Before Sunrise trilogy, but it's spread out with two grumpy, sarcastic, middle-aged men, and it's very funny. Yeah, it's very, very funny. I suggest actually you guys start watching The Trip. Do not start with The Trip to Greece. Just start from the beginning. It's really funny stuff, especially if you like really snappy and witty dialogue.
Yeah.
Am I wrong? Am I remembering? Isn't there a sequence where they're doing like they're going back and forth and doing like dueling Michael Caine impressions? Right. It's really funny.
They're both good impersonators. Yeah, they do all these movies. It's really the same thing. Them doing impressions, them just talking crap to each other, being snide and being funny and being buddies. So if you watch one Trip, you've probably seen all of the Trips. But if you like that rhythm and that flow, that's great. But the reason why to check out The Trip to Greece is necessary is because it ends on a you can sense that if they ended it right here on The Trip to Greece, it would close a huge chapter. So there is, they could keep on churning these trips out time and time again, but especially with the way we are right now, I just don't know if they're going to do, let's say, the trip to Paris or something like that. But the Trip to Greece, the Trip movies are usually funny, and each of them is filled with a little bit of personal heartaches, but there's a finality to the Trip to Greece that makes it worth watching, especially if you're a fan of the Trip movie. So yeah, here's a plot summary: wining and dining through scenic Greece in an epic trip, retracing Odysseus's journey home to Ithaca. So Rob Brydon, he's not the big actor, so his job is he goes and he reviews these restaurants while Coogan is doing research for his respective roles. That's how the Trip movies work out. And yeah, definitely, especially you guys, try watching some of those. At least try one of those Trip movies. If you're not a fan of that initial rhythm, then you just go cash chips out and not watch the rest of it. So because it appeals to a select audience. So the Trip to Greece. Yeah. Luis, what you got?
All right. So I'm going to wrap up with two of them just to put both of them in there together. The first one is actually Veronica. This is a 2017 film. It's a Spanish film, and actually directed by Paco Plaza, and this is basically a Ouija board. What do I have to say? Don't fuck with a Ouija board. That's never a good idea. And this is basically what these little girls do. They're all in basically like a religious school, and they decide to grab this Ouija board and go down into the basement and call forth the spirits. And the spirits decide to come, and they say, well, you know what? There's a reason you don't fuck with Ouija boards. And this movie shows you all the reasons why in really, really well done way, where the suspense builds, and there's these moments of awkward tension between the girls that is so realistic. And for the fact that these are young girls acting just that age and being able to grab that performance that they did in this film, it is just incredible. Like I haven't seen a kid performance that well since like a Spielberg film back in the 90s. Like it is really well done, and they're very well, like they're believable. Like every aspect of it, you actually buy in from the beginning to end. Most of these like possession films and stuff like that, I always have issues with it. This follows it pretty legit, and it's pretty interesting how they did it.
So it's set in Madrid, 1991.
Yes.
And yeah, I guess probably one of these, Bruna Gonzalez or Sandra Escacena, one of those.
Yeah, they weren't even, they're not even big names in Spain, but it works. It really works well for having no name actors in this film, because you want the buy-in factor of that. And it does it for a reason, and you could tell. The next one that I want to bring up, and that's actually streaming on Netflix. It has been for the last few years. Veronica, the next one that I want to bring up is a Shudder. It's on Shudder currently, and it is the 1980 version of The Fog, which just, if you find the treasure chest or a journal, just don't fuck with it. You know something's going to be bad in there. And it's John Carpenter at his best. This is one of those just glorious white knuckle movies, and even the remake is actually pretty decent. I think a lot of people give it shit. I thought it was actually pretty well done.
I was gonna crack that. I prefer the Rupert Wainwright 2005 version of The Fog, and that might not be popular. But you said it's not so bad.
It's not so bad. There's no comparison to the original one, though. But it's just that Carpenter music, dude. That music is just so spot on, and it elevates this film in particular with that music. It literally gives it a whole full star. Just the music alone, it is that glorious. And if you have not seen this and you've been living under a rock for horror movies, this is one that you could actually enjoy and don't need to worry about being a horror fan. It's not gory. It's accessible even beyond the genre itself. And I think this is a good one to basically give to kids, maybe probably like 10 to 15 range.
Really?
And you could actually introduce them to the genre by doing this.
Is this top tier Carpenter? Would you say top tier?
I would say probably top. That's hard, man. Carpenter is freaking great. I would say probably top 3, maybe.
Okay. Wow. Okay.
How about you, Bruce? What do you think?
It's definitely in his top 5, I would say. Yeah, I mean, I wanted to point out, it's got some great radio stuff with Adrienne Barbeau. Yeah. So lots of Adrienne Barbeau, if you know who she is.
Cannonball Run.
Yeah. And I believe, if I'm wrong about this, I apologize, but I thought it takes place does it take place in Bodega Bay? The same place?
Don't remember the location, actually.
The Birds? For some reason, I feel like it takes place in the same place as The Birds, but I don't know why I thought that. Either way, it's definitely, if it's not top tier Carpenter, it's top tier Carpenter music.
Yeah.
And the opening scenes where you got the whole town is dark and the music is going and everything is kind of starting and the fog is still rolling in and you got all this. I mean, it's classic era where you've got all those like blue lens flares, and he's got that really wide screen. It's just moody as hell. It's pretty
really
good.
Well done. Like the effects and everything, the practical and special effects are really well done in this.
Yeah.
And Carpenter has an eye for that, though. Like every single one of his movies, it stands the test of time because of the care that he puts into the films. And this is no different than that, because it really shows the care that Carpenter put in this film and everybody else on the cast and crew, because it's stellar across the board. This is a 5 out of 5 for me.
Wow. Okay.
Veronica is another 5 out of 5. I didn't give my ratings for the other ones. Oculus is a 4.5 out of 5, and Rubber I'll give a 3 out of 5. It's a fun movie, but it doesn't have any. I'm going to call up Anderson again, and I think he made a point about 4 stars. I'm not defending my 4-star Greg thing. I like the moniker, but he said when you think of 4 stars, you think if you multiply it by 2, because five times the 100 scale, 4 times 2 is 80, right? So that's an 80%. That's a B. So 3.5 should be a C. So I go with now. I just go with Anderson Cowan's rating. So that's why a lot of it is going to be, if you're saying 3. I mean, that's just how I do it now. Because so to your point, 4.5 out of 5 is we're going to have a lot of 4.5 out of 5 just down the road, I think. So, and before we get to Eric, I just wanted to say Rupert Wainwright was the director of The Fog in 2005, which Louis, you didn't think was so bad. I just wanted to throw in a couple things. I'm not disagreeing because I haven't seen either movie. Rupert Wainwright, in 1992, he directed a video called Hammer and Home. In 94, he directed the Brian Bonsall from Family Ties, the Brian Bonsall headline comedy Blank Check. I remember watching that movie, Blank Check, at a screening and realizing I think I was 23 at that time, I was in a very depressive state after watching that movie, wondering why at 23 had I not done anything with my life after watching Blank Check. I'm sure if I saw that again now at 48, you would need William Lindis next week for the podcast. Now, in 1995, he directed The Sadness of Sex, which the alternate title is also, it's called The Gregsrisavasdi Story. In 1999, he directed Stigmata, which stars Gabriel Byrne and Patricia Arquette. Yes, as Eric Holmes, Hardline Holmes gives his face. I thought that was a passable film. And then he did a bunch of TV movies and shorts until The Fog in 2005. After The Fog, long story long, he just directed a whole bunch of shorts. He hasn't directed any movie since The Fog in 2005. He's now in pre-production in a film which is called Not Without Hope. So that's what's up with Rupert. Boys and girls, that's why you don't fuck with a Carpenter film.
Right. They do exactly, Louis. Now,
did you do The Gambler, or who am I thinking of? The Gambler in the first with Marky Mark, and then the first Planet of the Apes movie.
Oh,
no, Rupert Wyatt. Never mind.
Yeah. I've never seen The Gambler. Right. Yeah,
it's all right. It's all right.
Yeah,
it was good.
Yeah, name dropping number 3. I interviewed James Toback one-on-one years ago, and I asked him about The Gambler. Eric Holmes, Hardline Holmes.
Drop that. Sorry about that.
Yeah, as soon as they mentioned James Toback, we're just like we're dropping things. It fits into the theme of what we're talking about this episode. But when I asked James Toback about The Gambler, he says, "When I was a gambler, I wasn't playing to win. I was playing to lose." So. Gamblers don't play to win; they play to lose. Hardline Holmes. So follow that up with your picks. Hardline Holmes, what you got? Roll the dice.
I don't know how long we've been going, so I'll try to keep this short. But I posted a picture on the Facebook page.
Okay.
Go to the Facebook page, Movie Mainline, if you want to see. And there's a picture of a wall, and you got a little puddle and a little something in the background. And the picture doesn't mean much to me until I saw a movie called George Orwell, A Life in Pictures. And towards the beginning of the movie, it's kind of, we'll get back to that, but let's get back to the picture. So there's this picture, and it's nothing but this puddle on the bottom corner in a wall. It doesn't mean anything. But what it is in the foreground or in the background is there's gallows. And that puddle was something that the person that was going to be hung, as he walked up, George Orwell or his character noticed that the person being led to the gallows stepped around the puddle. And it became a thing. It's like, he was dead. Why does he care if his feet get wet? What about him makes him walk around this puddle? It doesn't matter. And then that's when I noticed, this is him, George Orwell talking now. That's when I noticed that he wasn't dying. He was alive, just like we all are. The only difference is in 2 minutes, one of those people walking towards the gallows is not going to walk back. And then after that, they show the puddle to, it's similar to, you hear about the mentally challenged guy that got executed in Texas. It's like, what do you want for your last meal? And he orders whatever he wants for his last meal and he eats some of it. It's like, you didn't finish it. And it's like, I'm going to save the rest of it for later. It's those moments in life that we take for granted, that we do, that we don't think that we do, that just kind of really illustrates our humanity. And there's a lot of that in this. But George Orwell, Life in Pictures, it plays like a documentary, but it's not a documentary. It's Chris Langham plays George Orwell, and a lot of it is, quote unquote, found footage of George Orwell and him talking about his life. I would check it out. I don't want to get too much into it, but it just builds up to his life up until the point where he dies. Spoiler alert, George Orwell is no longer with us, and he wrote a movie called 1984, or he wrote a book called 1984 towards the end of his life, and it's just a bunch of points in his life that lead up to him writing the book 1984, and it's pretty good. It's pretty good documentary, sort of, kind of movie. I guess you would call it a mockumentary, but
do you think it's
worth watching.
Yeah, is it more like of an insight into Orwell's life, or to your point with the puddles, more of an insight into humanity, or maybe it covers both? Is that what attracted you?
Both, definitely both. Definitely gets into his life. And it's weird. It's almost like you're watching found footage of George Orwell, but it's not him. It's the actor playing him. There's no George Orwell, as far as we know, has no video or audio of him. But
that's pretty cool. I love when they do that, though. It makes it feel like, I don't know if you guys ever watched that oh my God, I can't remember the name of it. Operation Avalanche, where it goes to, that's that's what I imagine.
It'd be a little more close to, have you seen Confederate States of America?
Yes. Okay.
Kind of like that. Kind of like how Confederate States of America it's presented as a documentary, but it's not a documentary. That's kind of what George Orwell, A Life in Pictures is.
Nice. That's awesome.
Luis,
and it's definitely worth watching.
Luis, do you watch more than 500 movies a year? It seems like you watch just a lot of movies. You do, right? Don't you?
I mean,
watch
last year
500 a week.
A little bit over 500.
You go a little bit over 500, don't you?
Last year, yeah. This year, no, not a chance. I'm probably going to hit like 360, maybe.
Not a chance from you too. But okay. George Orwell, A Life in Pictures. I'm on IMDb right now. It's 8.1 out of 10. It is hard to actually get. It's very hard to get to 8.1, on IMDb. So I really am excited to actually watch this on YouTube.
Yeah, you can find this one on YouTube. On Hardline YouTube.
Hardline YouTube. Okay, guys, that wraps up the fifth episode of Movie Mainline. I apologize for all the quadruple entendres we did. Do you guys have anything? Luis, do you have anything to say before we get out of here?
No, just check out the other content that I have on manbitesfilm.com. But yeah,
Brucepurkey, any final thoughts?
I guess check out reviews that I do on YouTube. Rustomire, RUSTOMIRE. I'm almost to 1,000 subscribers, but I'm only at 926, I guess.
Who's counting?
And keep tuned out there, people. We're going to try to do some off podcast things to keep you interested too. Maybe some spoiler episodes, maybe some other fun things. So keep listening and looking in your feed.
And don't just subscribe to the podcast, subscribe to the YouTube, because you'll be getting additional content through there.
Very cool. Very cool. Yes, definitely. Hardline Holmes, you wanna say something?
I want to reiterate the Movie Bears podcast. You can hit them up on their live stream on Tuesdays, which as we record this will be showing up pretty soon. But as this comes out, it'll be tomorrow. Check it out tomorrow. And we mentioned it earlier, but maybe we should double up on it next week. Andrew watches movies. Let's get him back.
Let's get
Andrew watches movies back.
Let's definitely get Andrew watches movies. It's been another week, another fun week of Movie Mainline podcast. I am your moderator, Greg, horrible moderator, Srisavasdi. Listen to Man Bites Film, Man Bites Media, all of that Man Bites Media universe from Luis Lacau, Rusto Meyer, the YouTube channel of Brucepurkey, I'm going to use that name, and Hardline Holmes. You know, I really do regret that. Hardline Holmes, by the way, folks who are not watching the YouTube stream, I apologize because the whole episode, I take this as a kind gesture. Because he talks about George Orwell and he's really a deep guy. He's been doing this Nicholas Winding Refn film where he just throws all these different colors into his window while people are talking to probably try to get my attention. You have always had my attention, Hardline Holmes. Don't worry. Subscribe to all these people. These are my very good friends. We are Movie Mainline podcast, Movie Mainline. We will see you next week. Subscribe to our show, rate and review, do all that stuff. We love you guys. We want to hear what you guys think. Take care. Talk to you soon.